All right. Hello. Welcome to our meeting tonight. I'd like to call to order our work session at 5 o'clock. Our regular meeting will start at 6. So our work session is now in order. We will please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so our item number 4, are we in the work session? Okay, so we'll go to 4 when 6 o'clock. Okay, that's what I thought. We're on our work session, so we'll go ahead and begin. I wanted to start with just discussing the training and the report that we had. I know I wasn't able to attend the last meeting, and I know some discussion took place. Ladies, would you like to tell us how that went? We just saved it all for tonight? Okay, that was good. So we, Dr. Wilson, we met with...
Yeah, so as a reminder, we met over the summer and had a training opportunity for the governing board, but also for district administration. The idea behind it was kind of multifaceted. The first was just to bring everybody together. And I think there's always value in doing that, to have time to spend with each other and socialize and collaborate. I think that builds relationships, and that's kind of foundational to overall organizational success. But we also began looking for strategies and structures that allowed us as an organization to be more efficient and more effective. And part of that dialogue was also geared towards the governing board, having some systems and structures that would allow you to be more efficient and more effective. Certainly some of the recommendations from our facilitator aren't governing board dependent. And I sent to you several weeks ago kind of an overview of what we're doing. And I'd be happy to spend some time on that at some point, and tonight if you would like. To make sure that you're comfortable with some of the decisions and some of the rationale in those decisions for some of the things we're doing in relationship to the recommendations from our facilitator. But really the hope tonight was that the governing board would have an opportunity for the first time to really talk about the recommendations of the facilitator, not just to the organization, but in particular to the governing board. And if you think back to her report and some of the communication I sent you, she kind of gave next step suggestions that certainly are well-founded, but ultimately have to be something that you as a body ascribe to and believe in and support and champion. And so the hope tonight is that there can be some movement towards you all having an opportunity to discuss those, but at the same time working towards some sort of agreement as a board on how you're going to operationalize, which then allows you to be more clearly defined and directional to the district and the district administration. Does that make sense?
Quick, obvious, do you guys feel that was beneficial, the training? I didn't.
Absolutely, yeah. But I think it's only beneficial to the extent that we utilize.
And I think that's a good point, so let's try to apply that.
So my opinion is, I think the first thing that we need to do, and I asked Dr. Wilson to bring the kind of meeting of artists.
Oh, did you bring it?
I did, yeah. I feel like the
We could have it on the wall.
Well, and I think the first thing that we need to do is discuss those, see if we want to change them, adopt them, make them our own, discuss what that means, how we communicate with each other in the community, and then move on from there once that's been adopted, in terms of the items going forward.
So I probably should have typed these out and divided them to you, and I felt
That was just far better.
Yeah. I really good. Like, I get a
Get a picture of that.
But I think, one of the things, and I go back to when we were all together, and initially we started the day off with these. And at first, I think it was kind of from my perspective, it was kind of like, okay, well, every meeting has a community norms, and that's great, let's report. But as we worked through the day, I think we kept coming back to some of these, and we kept coming back to them in such a way that it allowed us to be anchored in our facilitation and our discussion. And my hope would be that as a governing board, you see value in these or in something like this, and that you then can have these be part of your community norms or your dynamic norms as you move forward. And if so, then we'll obviously make it a little bit more professional than this. And then they get posted and it gets referenced. And so, for example, this is a we thing, take collective ownership. That sounds great. Sounds really great. And everybody's going to shake their head yes. But the implications to that is something very different. Because when we say it's a we thing, the we becomes the majority of the five. So as a governing board, you have an opportunity to discuss, interact, make decisions, but when a decision is made, you collectively as a governing board are the we. And so even though you're individuals, you become a we, and the we is demonstrated by the actions you take as a governing board. And that, again, sounds easy, but there's some implications to that. There's some implications to that from my perspective on how you conduct yourself when you be the governing board. Because if you are a we, and the we determines something that you as an individual may not have agreed with, you are a we in terms of how you engage with the public as a member of the governing board. So that sounds really simple, but I think if there's an opportunity to take some time for the five of you to process these, have a discussion about them, and I'm not trying to beat a bag, but I think it's important because when you walk out of here, if you're going to ascribe to this we, then there's some behavioral implications to you as an individual as part of the we. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, how do we, instead of just saying the word, maybe that, how are we going to apply it?
Oh, thank you.
You're just gonna stand there and hold
Yeah, I was going to
it.
say, I don't think I have an hour in me.
Oh, well,
That's even better.
Hey, now the timer has to read on.
So at least number one, I feel like I have some level of experience in because I do trainings on meeting through an interest-based process. That's what that reminds. I wasn't there, so I apologize. But that's what that reminds me of. And so I would rephrase that, not necessarily there, but one of the ways we speak of it is when we go to make a decision, and we use some, not to go through that, but, there are some decisions that are like some people's favorite things. It's the best thing in the world for you. And then there are other people who, like we say, can live with it. So by live with it, we always define that as you can walk out the door, you can talk to your friends, you can talk to constituents, you can talk to whoever, and you're going to support the decision, even though it wasn't your favorite thing. It wasn't the thing that you fell in love with. And then we have someone who's in opposition now. When we say a we thing, the words we use are consensus. We come to a consensus that the group has decided that this is the best option for that particular time, given the resources and what's available and every part of the environment that's around that. And so, goal or we work with is for everybody in the room to walk away either in favor or willing to live with it and accept the decision. And if there's somebody who's not, then we continue to work until we come to that consensus. That may be a little different than what we're doing here, but
Very similar.
to me, that's the goal that we're looking for, is that if the four of you have something in mind, which, may well happen, and certainly had that before, and I can't live with it, I need to let you know that I can't live with it, that I can't walk out the door and tell somebody that I think that's a decision that we can live with. Now, I personally think that I have to get to that place. For me, I have to get to that if that's what the decision is. But I think that's kind of where we're at. Is we can get to a place where everybody can either live with it or walk out and support it, then that's what my sense of the goal of a collective decision is.
So, I like that process. One of the questions I would have is if I can't live with what the majority or all are saying, is it your responsibility to find a way that I can, or is it my responsibility to find a way to? Does that make sense?
I think it goes both ways. I think it's the responsibility of the person who's on the, I like the word team, but on the group to open their their mind and start to look at more of acceptance. And I think it's for the responsibility of those who are in the, call it the majority, or on, that side, to understand the position of that person and try to come to a place where we can understand each other. And quite often what happens is, what you'd like to do, we'd love to do, or what I'd like to do, we'd love to do, but right now we don't have the money, or right now we don't have the right personnel, or right now the legal situation doesn't allow, or something, there's some barrier that, so it's circumstantial, it's not necessarily that you're wrong.
And those are the sorry,
Go ahead.
the more difficult ones. We are agreeing on a lot of things, and have to move forward. But like you said, when we can't come to a total agreement,
Yeah, finally,
how do we get there?
Yeah, the groups I work with, what we work to is, which I would expect that we may not want to do this, but I'm pretty certain we wouldn't. But you make a commitment that you're going to work until you reach consensus. So that's kind of what, that's how you get to that. So,
Go ahead, Mrs. Zero.
I don't know that that's always possible, and although if we don't agree on something, I may understand where you're coming from, you may understand where I'm coming from, we may not agree on the final outcome, but when I walk out the door, I'm supportive of this is not.
that's exactly, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying.
One of my, when we were making some big decisions, a lot of people were do this or this, there's no really in the middle. My biggest frustration is I understand that there's going to be a minority, the majority. My biggest frustration was not knowing the other side. So I'm not saying outvoted, but even if someone has this opinion of me, my frustration is that I didn't get facts or their opinions more often for me to help me understand. So I had even stated this when we were making those big decisions. If you could just explain to me why you're saying what you're saying on your side, and I can explain why, then maybe they convince me a little bit more where it's like, come on, now I can see where you're coming from, and now you can see where I'm coming from, and maybe we could even up a little bit. Not that we would still agree with about, at the end of the day, but it was a matter of just less frustration to know, what, I'm saying yes, and that's because I want to. That's the biggest frustration for kids with their parents. It's a matter of explain it to me, not because I'm being defiant, just explain it to me so that I can understand. And in that way, it might even change my mind because I know. So that was my biggest frustration, is that no one really kind of stated it. If you're being outvoted, you kind of hide in parts of your time on the degree because I'm going to be outvoted anyways. No, you should stand up even as one, just to let everybody else understand. And that might even convince 2 or 3 other people to come to the other side or not.
And I don't think, but I think that's the benefit of this kind of conversation, is it's not because we're quite honestly constricted, from going off in a coffee shop and having those kinds of conversations because of open meetings, which is a good law, and it's great that we have them. But the ability to have this kind of conversation doesn't exist nearly as much in the framework of a regular meeting.
Right.
You're absolutely right.
Ms. Kimball? Good?
No, I agree with that.
That's
Can I
good.
give you that kind of unprotected? Sorry, do you want to?
You're recording.
So I think kind of coupled with that, it's important too. Sometimes when you say something, I may be hearing something different than what you're saying, and I don't know how you word that, and I don't know that it's on there, but to come back and say, hey, this is what I'm hearing, because what I hear may not be what you're
Right.
So
Which is
review.
our biggest assumed positive intent,
Right.
a lot of times.
But I think instead of
But
assuming
review.
it needs to be expressed.
Review the idea, review the what you're saying.
Exactly.
Because you don't want to assume.
And your opinion might be not what you want to have out there.
I think coupled with the community agreements was also a recommendation for protocols within the context of the meeting. I think sometimes protocols need to be alert in order for them to become habits within the organization. And so if I hear some of the conversation correctly, part of the benefit would be for the governing board to agree on some protocols in terms of discussions like this, meaning everybody has an opportunity, and the board president will look down, and then potentially, as crazy as kindergarten as it sounds, then the person that is up next restates what they thought they heard, so that there is that consistency in dialogue. And I would suspect in developing that pattern and routine, that becomes more the norm, and it's no longer this kind of awkward I'm not gonna talk for a minute, and I'm gonna repeat what Danielle said, because it becomes how you operationalize and do business, so that there isn't the misunderstandings, because you're right. I think part of the we requires their dialogue and understanding, but sometimes we don't get to that for 1,000 different reasons, and so we're left kind of struggling. So maybe one of the things I would suggest is the governing board, in addition to the community agreements, begin thinking of some protocols that you like as part of your board meeting dynamics, so that when a question is posed, it starts somewhere, and every individual gets an opportunity, and you can pass, because you may not have something to say, don't step up. You can pass, but before you pass, you restate in your own mind, your own words, what the person just before you said, so everybody online gets a chance to hear it a couple of different times, so that there isn't any misunderstanding.
Well, past, hearing, it's a lot longer.
Well,
Well, it's more of a process. I agree, because I try to do this more, but to have a process or a protocol to say, we're gonna go right down the line and here, and make that happen.
And then sometimes, even if you understand what the person's saying, you agree to disagree.
Right.
You know?
Well, and just because we go down the line, we might pass the first time, but once he says a comment, you might want to have come back and say, I didn't understand this comment, or I have something to say on that comment. Doesn't mean your turn over to this.
And I think that you do a good job of that.
Well, I appreciate it. I think
Sorry,
it's
y'all, you're
fully appropriate to include them in this, the way we conduct our business.
other items that you want or don't want as part of your community agreements. I mean, again, I'm not trying to put words in your guys' mouth. Items, if you don't know, ask, questions are encouraged. That sounds like a really great thing that we have in schools, but that's really important, because I don't think it's fair for the members of the governing board to be in situations where after the fact, they don't understand the context of the decision that we made. So if there is a legitimate lack of understanding, then ask the question. I think you have the right to ask the question.
But I think that actually might come out more if we do what we were talking about before, which is, why was your opinion, tell me more about your opinion. There's some things that we got. But when we have that, we need to talk about it. I think that will all together.
Okay, so when we get in those situations, we'll say we use the protocols and we'll really formalize it. Get it on the formal process.
So, I'm looking down at, say something even as hard. I'm out of order. It kind of goes with the questions that you might want to ask. I always like to think of a discussion like this as being a safe space. I think that's not say it. Say something, you're not going to hurt somebody's feelings or change something. We don't want to be inappropriate or cruel or anything like that. I think we need to be honest. We're in a political environment, so sometimes that's difficult if we end up wanting to say things politically correctly. But I think we have to be honest with each other and not.
Well, I think that was difficult at some point, because when you offer your opinion and it's not agreed upon, then you tend to hold your opinion, you're avoiding confrontation because you know that it won't go along with someone else's. And some decisions we make are, I don't want to say personal, because it's not, but it does touch close to home for some of us, depending on what we're talking about. And I know that some people will just hold back to avoid the confrontation. And then I think we collectively vote and say the we thing, but I also do think we walk out the door thinking, I want to walk out that door and think, you know what? I stated what I wanted, I understood, but why we voted the way we did, why everybody else voted the way we did, and be able to walk out there as a we and be comfortable. And I think that by being honest and actually saying those hard things, it would be a lot easier to walk out.
That's good you understand we all care, otherwise we'd be somewhere else.
in that training that really hit home to me, to be truthful, is assume positive intent. Because I have a tendency to get defensive, and that defensive posture doesn't necessarily create the opportunity for me to have the best dialogue. And I would encourage the governing board to think through that as well, because I may be defensive and recognize that limits my opportunity, but I have watched dynamics on this board where conversations escalated, and I wasn't even part of them, and that same behavior demonstrated by board members. And ultimately, then we weren't necessarily taking time for thinking and processing, and we weren't being the we, and we weren't asking questions, and so everything else kind of started to fall to pieces. But so from my perspective, I think that that's not just a feel-good statement. I think it's a behavioral expectation that if the governing board agrees to it, requires everybody to really keep that at the forefront of their thinking about each other. Which
And I think that came across both sides of the conversation.
It has to. I mean, for it to be successful, it has to on both sides of the conversation.
Which is when you are thinking of somebody saying something that might not be what you expected, when you react, so you can clarify. When you feel, oh, I thought that was coming across my news, it wasn't, it was just the way that you presented it. That was one of the biggest things I also put comment, and I actually throw it out there every now and then. You know, just having conversations, even with not even us who've been in the training, but I'll go to work now. You're not being confident, you know, and I reiterate what I'm talking about. Now, I don't go through the whole training, but that actually hit me closest to home during the whole training because of what she said. And you won't hear, I don't even remember reading it in the notes, but she said she felt a sense of disconnect with the board. And that kind of hurt my feelings. And I'm like, I thought we all get along. But obviously, people will get, you know, outside looking in, and that's what she got just from half a day with us. It kind of hit close to me. You know, by us asking questions and having more opinions and actually having a conversation like we are right now, and bring that disconnect. We're always positive. Kind of hard to, but I think by talking about it, we can just bring that better.
I had a good opportunity to talk with Carrie quite a bit about, you know, before and after, and get her reflections just because I was interested in her perspective. And it was, I think, that statement that you described was, I think, a part of not just board dynamics, but kind of across the board. There was a sense of real desire and want and belief in the organization, belief in our community, belief in our kids. But there was this underlying kind of frustration that maybe exists. And as a governing board, from her perspective, as a governing board, those, you know, we work at the direction of the majority of the five of you. And so having that disconnect amongst you and creating an environment that isn't real clear to us makes it more problematic for us moving forward. And so I think her point was, is if you guys get into a place that you're not going to have to be best friends, but get into a place that you have a collegial, professional, working relationship in which you have open dialogue and you have positive intent, allows you to have decisions and recommendations that are clear, much more clearly articulated to the district administration, which is fair to us then to go through our business knowing what the direction is and not necessarily wondering, is it the direction today, but different in the parking lot after the meeting.
Well, and we've demonstrated that we've gone in different directions, so we have to get together, be that team, and follow through.
I think every one of us here is here with positive intent. I think everything that we discuss is, I think we're positive about it, and we're passionate about it. So there is positive intent. Maybe it wasn't hard to do it, but I think we mean that.
And I agree that we all individually mean that. That's our intent. But do you interpret that from everybody else? And I think that's the variable. I think we all believe ourselves are positive in this.
I think these guys are older.
But displaying, I mean, I can raise my hand and say, I struggle, I want to work on
protocols, suggestions for protocols that you would like to see articulated for you. We talked about having kind of this chain of discussion, having this reiterating. I know in the feedback from Carrie, she said if there's things you want to see, then put them on paper so that we know that's what you want to see. And so is there any discussion you'd like to have as a governing board in terms of the dynamic of the board meeting? Meaning, we have students that are on, we have department/campus reports monthly. Is there other variables that you as a board would want to talk on potentially as part of that meeting dynamic so that we can make sure that we're moving forward in the structure with our meetings that match your needs?
Part of what we discussed was celebrating kind of everyday successes, putting artwork or whatever into the facility, so it's not quite so frustrating.
Also, the parents, they come in, they see those kids on the wall. I've been telling you that.
But even just starting at.
So because this is an open, and because this is the open discussion, I think it's good to I think it's good to make sure that we get up on the right foot. So you have been telling us, and you're right. But when I hear you say that in a public meeting like this, in my mind, I get defensive that you call that out. Well, but the point is that I need to be a bigger boy and not get defensive. But if we're going to assume the positive intent, then I don't think this God purposefully did it to
Well, I don't
be
think she
mean.
did either.
But I don't know that she feels that way when you make the comment.
Look at her, she laughed.
What is she going to do?
She knows I'm talking with her. See, what does it say at the bottom? Laughing is good.
Laughing is good, not at the expense of others.